Hi guys, Lone Wanderer here. This is part 3 of the knife module on what basic knife to have as you as a beginner bushcrafter, where to start, what kind of knife to go for purely for the beginner, not the more experienced obviously. And at the end of part 2, I discussed the kind of knives and the grind that I recommend, which is the Scandinavian grind, due to ease of sharpening in the field, and because obviously it's got that nice wedge shape as well, so it's good for splitting wood to a certain degree. So it's got that added strength, very easy to sharpen because you just follow the bevel, which obviously I'll go into in later modules. So obviously again, this is purely for the beginner, not the most experienced bushcrafters. Most experienced bushcrafters already know everything, or if they don't, maybe they can pick up some tips as well as I'm going along. But this channel is really basically, well, these modules that I'm going to be making are purely for the very beginners and where to start regarding kit and knives. Obviously knife is going to be the more popular one, because there's so many out there, so many different grinds, shapes, sizes, and so I thought the first basic bushcraft module should be about a knife, because 9 times out of 10 when people first go into bushcraft, the first thing they go out and buy is a knife. So it's like, forget the sleeping bag, or forget the tent or anything like that, we'll just buy a knife. So I thought for this basic bushcraft modules that I'm going to be doing, I thought I'd discuss about knives, because that's obviously my area of expertise. About knives, I love my knives. I collect knives. I've used knives for decades in the field. So yeah, I know a thing or two about what makes a good knife, but obviously my opinions might be different to yours as you start your journey into bushcraft and you transition from beginner and then climb up the ladder kind of thing and gain more experience. You might find that the Scandi grind no longer works for you, and you might look into other grinds, which we're going to discuss quickly here. So the more in-depth video was about Scandinavian grinds, because obviously that's the more popular grind for bushcrafts, especially beginners. As I said, for ease of sharpening and things like that, and what to look out for, and what is the Scandinavian grind, and things like that. All that was in the video. I don't even know what video. Are we in part 3 now, or part 2? Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. Just watch the previous parts of the video to find out where I was getting at, without losing myself. So the other grinds, I'm not going to go into the technicalities of, because there's hundreds of different grinds out there, shapes, sizes, etc. I'm not going to go through them all because I'm going to be here all day. I'm just going to go with the more popular ones. Okay, so obviously we've already discussed the Scandinavian grind, the ins and outs of that, the advantages of that knife, and I highly recommend that for the beginner bushcraft, being you. So now we go on to other grinds, and at the end of the video I'll discuss why the other grinds I'm about to show you is perhaps not going to be a good idea for when you're first getting into bushcraft. Okay, and I'll tell you why. Okay, so another knife grind that comes up often in the world of bushcraft is a flat grind, a full flat grind, which is what this is. There's my wrecking knife. Now, as you can see, I'm not on about the handle or anything like that, just purely the blade. So as you can see, there is a difference between the bottom one, which I've just shown you in the last video, the Scandi grind, and the top one. Okay, so the shape of the edge, not the shape of the knife, the shape of the edge, the geometry is different. As you can see, the entire thing is flat. Okay, so there is no no deep bevel, no shoulder along here whatsoever, and the only bevel that there is, and it's only very tiny, is here, if the camera picks it up, all the way along to the tip, and that's where the bevel starts, right at the end of the tip, just before it hits the apex. So it's not up here, it's all the way down here. That's called a flat grind, and it's called that for a reason. You've probably worked that out now. It's because a flat grind is basically one flat piece of steel, totally flat, no bevels or rounded edges, and the only bevel that there is right here on the very edge, and apart from that it is totally flat all the way along until you get to this bevel at the edge. And flat grinds tend to be thin behind the edge, which makes them exceptional slices. Okay, in fact I prefer a flat grind like this better than a Scandi grind for slicing. And again, you as a basic bushcrafter will probably learn different grinds the same as I have over the years, what works for you. But for me, a flat grind as thin as this, I think this is only 3mm thick, and it tapers towards the edge to about, I don't know, about 1.5mm, something like that, I don't know. This is a knife I made because I'm going for a bit of a traditional phase at the minute, where I like to make traditional style like mountain man knives, and this is my version of a Kephart which I made out of a old butcher's knife, I believe. A very old and vintage one. It's not perfect because I'm not a knife maker, but it's just a project that I like to do. But anyway, this is a flat grind. The steel is totally flat, 100% flat, until you get to the very edge of the steel. Well, you've got a very tiny bevel on the edge, and that is the only bevel that you've got, and that's called a flat grind. Okay, so hopefully that clears the flat grind up. I'll show you another knife with another flat grind. So this is a lot smaller knife, so you might be able to see it better. It's another one of my favourites. This is only a small knife, but again, it's the same thing. So you've got flat steel all the way along. Obviously, it drops down, drop point towards there. But the same thing. Steel's all flat all the way along until you get to the very edge. There, you see the bevel if the camera picks it up. See it reflecting all the way along there. Okay, so there's nothing else here but right at the edge, the apex, and that's called a flat grind. And to help you remember, it's when the steel is flat and there is no bevel until you get to the very edge. That is a flat grind, true flat grind. Now there's a lot of modifications and variations of flat grind, the same as there's other variations of Scandi grinds. Put that back out to sharpen him son. And just going to pause it. Sorry about that, just had to pause it. Heard a knock at the door. Well, now that's affected the video, I'm not too sure, but I'm back with you now. So yeah, we've discussed a flat grind, which is another grind on the market, which is well, blade terminology that you're going to hear quite a lot with different grinds. So flat grind, obviously flat piece of steel, like a secondary bevel right on the very apex. So we discussed two knives in that category, classed as a flat grind, which I've just shown you. So now we move on to what's called a sabre grind. Now a sabre grind is, people get this mixed up, and I suppose they look similar to a Scandi grind, but they're not. So this is a I've had this a long time. It's a really good knife, this. Okay, so at first look, you maybe think it's just a high Scandi grind, something like that, but it's not. It's what we call a saber grind. A saber grind is because basically, if you know your swords, like back in the day when they have battles and swords and things like that, the most common grind on a sword was called a saber grind, which went for a sword called a saber, which is designed to slice and being incredibly strong edge as well, but it tends to slice things like butter. So this is a saber grind. Okay, so if we look at saber grind, okay, so unlike the flat grind, it's not flat, because if I tilt it up, you can see the bevel there, and it's very hard to see, but it is there. Okay, so saber grind, the bevel starts up here, usually quite high up there. Now a saber grind has two bevels, primary and secondary bevel. That's why it's called saber grind, because it's that kind of saber shape. And obviously the secondary bevel adds strength to the edge and the apex of the knife, and it looks very similar to a Scandi grind. It's hard to tell because obviously the shape, but you don't get the kind of chisel shape. It's not as pronounced as the Scandinavian grind, so you don't get the perfect V shape in a saber grind as you do a Scandinavian grind, which again I'll show you. Okay, so if you look at this here, this bevel here, and again it's really hard to see, and you've got that V, that tapered V there, with just got a secondary bevel, but this is only a micro bevel, and this is the very common grind that people get mixed up, or say it's a Scandi when it's not. And I can see why people get it mixed up, because a saber grind does look like, especially from a distance, and if you're not experienced, then it does look, a lot of Scandi grinds do look like a saber grind, and a saber grind do look like a Scandi. So but to the untrained eye, then both look similar. But when you gain experience and you learn about different knives and bevels and things, then you know what to look for in the different grinds that I'm showing you now. So this is a saber grind. So a saber grind has two bevels. One that tends to be high up, which starts probably usually at the middle of the blade, or very high up in the blade. Okay, so it starts off almost like a Scandi grind when the bevel's high up, and then it tapers down towards the edge, but then you've got another bevel here, which tends to be thicker than a micro bevel. So the secondary bevel is not really a micro bevel, it's just a thin bevel, well, not quite tiny enough to be classed as a micro bevel. So to be classed as a true saber grind, it has got to have two bevels, a large high bevel here, which tapers down to a smaller bevel along the apex of the edge. Okay, that's what you look for in a saber grind. Because this blade shape, I'll probably show you a more common knife, which is called a Becker BK2, which is this one. I customized this myself, so obviously when you get your Becker BK2, it doesn't look like this. This is one I've customed. Okay, so again you can see the grind. Okay, so if I put it there and you just tilt it up slightly, so it's not a flat grind because the steel is not flat. You can just see the shoulder, the bevel start there. So the bevel starts here, you can feel it with your finger all the way along here, and then it thins out here, and then you hit the secondary bevel, which is here along this edge, usually a few millimeters before you hit the apex. Okay, so it starts off high and goes all the way down here to you hit the secondary bevel. So if you just give me a second, another knock at the door. Sorry about that, don't know if it affected the camera again. That's the second time I've paused. I'm never going to get this video done. So second time I've paused the video. Oh dear. Right, so yeah, I discussed the sabre grind. So obviously, as you can see there, you've got your first bevel here that goes all the way along, and then you've got all this real estate here, this slicing edge, and you go down to the secondary bevel there. Okay, and you can see they look similar to a Scandinavian grind, and that's where people get confused, because from a distance, without going up close and having a look, they do look similar. But as you can see, a sabre grind is different when you know what you're looking at to a Scandi grind. Okay, so yep, so yeah, that's a sabre grind. So another common grind is called hollow grind. Okay, so the knife I'm about to show you is one of my favourite hollow ground knife made by Buck. It's Golden Ollie. This is a Buck 124 Frontiersman. Now don't worry, obviously, again, this is channel is for beginners, so don't worry about terminology, knife brands, price, or anything like that. This video here is purely for explaining the differences between grinds. Okay. Now, I've had this knife a long time, and I did a review on this knife many years ago, and the particular year that I did this on, in that particular year, this is the knife that surprised me the most. Okay, and I'll tell you why in this video. Is the grind. Okay, so this is called a hollow grind. Now, it's very rare that a large knife has a hollow grind, because normally large knives like this, you want it to be strong. As well as a good slicer, you need it to be strong, and sometimes a large knife such as this, you want it to process wood, batoning, obviously chopping and things like that. So it's very rare that you see large knives like this with a hollow grind. Now normally when you get a large knife like this with a hollow grind on it, you instantly know it's not going to be up to the task of being a heavy duty knife. And normally when a knife like this has got a knife as big as this has got a hollow grind on it, it tends to be in a lot of the cheap knives, cheap knockoff knives, or cheap Chinese knives, and whatever they're producing these days, because it's the easiest grind to do, and the cheapest knife grind to do as well, and they can get away with selling hollow grind knives really cheap. But in this case, this is Buck, so this knife isn't really cheap, and it's not a knife that is readily available in the UK. You can find this, obviously, it's made by Buck in USA. Buck is purely American knife company. Been going a long time, I think since 1950s, 50s and 60s, correct me if I'm wrong. History on that is a bit vague, but I think it's around the 1950s or 60s they've been going for. And back in the day, there was a lot of hype about this knife. This is what I call a full tang knife, which means the steel goes all the way through to the handle. So this is a full exposed tang. Goes all the way through the handle, pretty much the same kind of thickness as the steel that's on the edge. And a full tang knife is the strongest knife that you can get. If you want a knife that's purely for heavy duty, batoning, chopping, etc., then it needs to be full tang. And this is no exception. But the difference between this and a normal large bladed knife is that Buck has made this into a hollow grind. Now, what do I mean by a hollow grind? Well, a hollow grind, it's basically a very large thin bevel. Okay, so as you can see, compared to the other knives, previous knives I've shown you, this is very large. You've got all this cutting edge here all the way along. Look how wide that is. Okay, so that's probably just over an inch wide of cutting edge. And a hollow grind, which means they grind it down really thin. So a hollow grind is really thin behind that edge here. Okay, and if you tilt it to the side, you'll see it's kind of like a funny shape, like inverted U, well, like a U shape. So a hollow grind, that's how you can tell usually, is that kind of that slight bend. It doesn't bend outwards, it bends inwards. So if you look at that, it's really hard to pick up on camera. You'll see that U, that bends there, it bends up, just like a U shape. That's how you know when you've got a hollow grind. And the hollow grind is extremely good slicer. As you may know, you'll see hollow grinds such as this in like kitchen knives. Most kitchen knives have hollow ground knives because of the ease of the way they slice through your meat and your veg and your food prep. So most food prep knives tend to be hollow ground knives because a kitchen knife needs to be really thin behind the edge. Okay, but the thing is, this is a large knife, and Buck made this to be heavy duty. So why did they put a hollow grind on a heavy duty knife? And I've been trying to answer that question for years. I still don't know 100% know the answer. Maybe they put it on because they wanted a general all-round camp knife. So you've got a knife for skinning, a knife for food prep, and a knife for wood processing. In which case this would be the perfect grind to go for. However, hollow grind is not the best for heavy duty work. It's certainly not the best for batoning. It's certainly not the best for chopping with. Okay, so a hollow grind knife, because it's so thin here, it can bend, it can chip out, it can even break if you expose a hollow grind to any sort of heavy abuse. Like chopping through hardwood or batoning through hardwood. And but Buck was very clever. They knew this, and what they did is they put quite a large secondary bevel on it, which is there. You can just see it as the light through the window catches it. You can see that strong, really strong bevel all the way along that apex. So as well as this thin edge, you've got this slightly beefed out secondary bevel here. So it's got two bevels, just like the saber grind did. But and from a distance, if I look at that knife again, from a distance, well, not the best in comparison, but from a distance, if you look at the knives, I'll try and catch the light so you can see the bevel better. From a distance, the bevels, it looks the same. So you can easily mistake this for a saber grind, which is what this is, because they look the same. And you could probably see now, as you've been the novice and new to the knife world, how people can get confused. It's only when you know what you're looking at and you know what to look for. So from a distance it looks like a saber ground, but it's not, because obviously a hollow ground is ground much thinner here. I mean, if you turn it to the side, look how thin, and you can see that U shape, kind of U shape there, which dips inwards, and you can see how thinly that is being ground. So hollow ground tends to be really thin here. So you've got big chunky steel here, and a very slim profile here. That's in shape of a U, and then it's got a chunky secondary bevel here. And that's what makes this knife different. That's what makes this knife perform. I mean, yes, it's not going to be the most heavy duty knife you'll ever see or do, but it does stand up to abuse. And I have batoned with this, and I have chopped with this as well. I don't think I've still got the video on this channel, because I think it was on my old channel. I did it many years ago. But in the demonstration, I actually put this knife to use, heavy use. I mean, really heavy use. I mean, I got a log, I stood it on its end, and I think the logs must have been maybe about 4 inches thick, hardwood. And to demonstrate how good this knife was, and the heat treat called Boss heat treat that Buck does, I chopped and chopped and chopped with this knife through a solid piece of 4-inch thick log, and surprisingly it went through it rather quickly, which at the time worried me. I thought, well, this is a hollow grind knife, and I have just chopped through that solid thick wood as if it was nothing, like it was a heavy duty machete or something like that. And out of all the knives I reviewed and did that year, this is the one that stood out the most out of all of them, because this really surprised me. I thought, this is something special here, just because of that reason. And another thing about hollow grinds is they are extremely sharp. I mean, very sharp. And as far as carving is concerned, there's no better knife to carve with than one with a hollow grind, just because of how thin the steel is here. So when you are processing wood, because it's so thin here, it bites really deep into the wood, and you can get some really fine shavings and everything. So a hollow grind, if you have to have a good slicer, a very good slicer, and nothing else, then that's what a hollow grind will do for you. Okay, so hollow grind it's got a big chunk of steel here, and it's very thin steel here below the shoulder bit, and usually it's got, well, it has to sometimes it has to have a secondary bevel. If a hollow grind didn't have a secondary bevel, get that right, then it would just chip and it will break. So a hollow grind needs that secondary bevel on the apex, otherwise it'd be no good. It might be good, really good at slicing, but the edge wouldn't last long without that secondary bevel on the hollow grind. So again, hollow grind, it's ground really thin here. It's in the shape of a U. If you look at the ricasso bit area here, it's like if you can feel it with your finger. So your finger starts off there and it goes up, so it's like a U shape. So it's a U shape, ground really thin, and has a secondary bevel. Okay, so that's a hollow grind. Hollow grinds are exceptional slices, really good slices. So we have discussed flat grinds, saber grinds, and now hollow grinds. And I'll just show you another knife with the same grind, just so different types of knife. This is a discontinued one. This is called a K-bar Warthog, but it's discontinued. This is one of the Generation 1s, when they used to make it in the USA, which is now Taiwan. So this is a small K-bar Warthog. You can't buy this anymore. I'm just using this knife as an example. It's a very tiny compared to its bigger brother. And as you can see, it's the same thing. Look how thin that edge is. This is a hollow grind. So I know this is a funny shape for you, but you can clearly see the bevel starts here, so it's relatively thick up here. It's because this is a weird shape. So you've got a thick bevel here, and then a really thin grind on both sides, all the way up to the secondary bevel, which adds strength to this knife. And again, if you rub your finger there, careful without cutting yourself. So it starts off there and it goes up where the ricasso is, and you can really feel that U shape when you put your finger there. So again, same thing, hollow grind, that U-shaped grind, which is really thin. Okay, so another example of a hollow grind. Exceptional slices, but wouldn't be my first choice for heavy duty, because you do risk snapping your blade and chipping it quite badly. So that's the pros and cons of a hollow grind and a flat grind and a saber grind. So now we come on to, which you're probably not going to be at this stage, you're probably not going to be worried too much about it. Again, when I discuss grinds, it's going to be what's, after you've had more experience, it's whatever grind works for you. I highly suggest that you experience as you gain knowledge, and you start buying different knives, and just experiment with different knives, different shapes, different grinds, to try and find out what works for you. Maybe team up, let's say, a hollow grind knife, which is exceptional at wood prep, wood carving, and then team it up with an axe, or maybe a more heavy duty knife, full tang heavy duty chopper, and then you've got two different tools. So you've got a tool on one hand, you've got a tool that's good for carving and your bushcraft tasks, and then you've got another knife, maybe even an axe, hatchet, to do the heavy duty stuff. So you're not going to use the hollow grind to do the heavy stuff, you're just using the hollow grind knife to do your bushcrafty kind of stuff, like your carving, your notching and things like that. But within reason, you can do heavy duty stuff with this, okay? But I wouldn't use it for chopping and batoning, I'd say, all the time, because eventually it is a hollow grind and eventually it could snap. But it did surprise me that year when I reviewed it. So yeah, Scandinavs, we've done Scandinav, we've covered flat grind, saber grind, and we've just done hollow grind. So the final one, which I says not to worry about too much, is it's a bit of a weird one. This is the grind that everybody, it's kind of as either love or hate relationship with. And when you're more experienced and you gain more knowledge on sharpening and the way knife grinds work, you haven't really got a problem with this particular grind I'm about to show you. So this is an early Falkneven, called an A1, and like most Falkneven knives, they are all convex, what we call a convex grind, which is what we're going to discuss now. So this is a convex grind, and again, from a distance, it can be easily mistaken for either a saber grind or maybe even a Scandinavian grind from a distance, okay? And it's only when you say inspect it close up, then you know what it is. Okay, now normally you use a a convex grind, which is what this is, for heavy duty tasks, because there is no blade shape better for heavy duty tasks than a convex. Okay, so I can argue this blue till you're blue in the face. You know, when it comes to heavy duty work, heavy duty chopping, a convex grind is king. No shadow of doubt. There's just no competition really. Where a convex grind might not excel in some areas, it definitely excels in heavy duty work, heavy duty batoning, heavy duty chopping. And that's where a convex grind comes into its own. And I'll tell you why. So from far away, it could look like a saber grind, maybe even a Scandi grind if you don't see the top bevel, okay? But when you look closely, it's really hard to get this on camera. It's really difficult. You will see. Okay, so a saber, keep saying saber grind, stop it. So a convex grind usually has one bevel that is rounded towards the edge. Okay, so technically it's kind of got like a two bevels. It's what I like to call a sneaky bevel. So they sneak a secondary bevel in there. So it may look like a saber grind at first glance, but it's not. And this convex grind is less pronounced than some of the convex grind that you see on other knives, which I'll show you after this, more heavy duty. But this is a convex grind, and you can see that it's really hard to pick up with a camera, but you just got to trust me on this. So it's more rounded. So the bevel starts here, and it goes all the way down here. Okay, but then it kind of turns on itself. So the bevel starts. I'm trying to think. So this is your knife. Okay, this is your knife bevel. Okay, and then as you get towards the apex, it kind of rounds off before it hits the apex. Okay, so it's not a secondary kind of flat bevel. It's a rounded bevel. And again, it's really hard to pick this up on camera, and that's why I'm going to show you. I've got another knife which is can explain a little bit better about the convex grind. But convex grinds, obviously the bevel starts there and it tends to round towards the apex. So if you think about the best way of describing it is a convex grind being a Scandinavian grind, because essentially that's what it is, but with a slight modification. A Scandi grind is like a wedge shape, like this. Okay, and it's a wedge shape that starts from the shoulder all the way down into that shape. Now a convex grind is very similar to a Scandi grind. However, instead of being a wedge shape like this and being straight towards the apex, it's actually, if I move my fingers out, it's actually like that. So it actually rounds. So you've got a thin bevel, and behind that bevel is a rounded edge. So rather than like that, it's more like that. So if you get me, so it's rounded. So it starts off like a wedge shape, and then it goes out a bit and then round, then comes back into itself. And what that does, that makes that edge incredibly strong, because when you're chopping with it all the time, it's hitting that rounded edge instead of hitting something that's relatively thin behind the edge. And that's why convex grinds excel at chopping tasks and heavy duty tasks, because it makes the edge incredibly strong. So obviously it starts off there, and then before it hits the apex, there's like a invisible bevel, if you like, that kind of sticks out and then rounds off towards before you get to the apex. So it's like a rounded shape, as I've just shown you. I'll show you another knife where I'll see what you mean. If you look at an axe and you look at the grind on the axe, that is what you're getting. So you're getting like a rounded shape on an axe. And before it gets to the edge, it's rounded again to form that kind of round, like wedge shape. This is an Origin tracker knife, a custom knife, and I reviewed this a couple of days ago. If you want to see it, just check it out. Review this Origin tracker knife. I'm just going to use it as an example. So as you can see, this is a convex grind. Okay, so you can see the bevel starts here, and you can feel it, clearly feel it with your finger, and then when you tilt it, you can probably just see it there. Can you see how it's like it rounds, the rounded shape that you get all the way up to the apex. So all that, it starts there and then it gets round all the way up to the apex. Okay, it's really hard to tell, and then it thins out. So again, you've got a big bevel here, it rounds off here all the way up to the edge, and again, only by using your finger you can tell where the secondary bevel is. So it starts here, and then round, you can feel the rounded portion here, and it's being really professionally done and molded into the shape, molded into the steel to form that beautiful convex edge, which is what this is. And the same with this side as well, the cutting portion. You can see that rounded shape. So it starts off there, it sticks out slightly, you can only see it with your finger, feel it with your finger, and then comes in back in itself. So it's that nice lovely round shape, and that adds incredible strength to your edge. And the reason why I think people struggle, again I'll go through this, on different videos on sharpening is because people think convex grinds are harder to sharpen. Now, if you're new to this all, then yeah, convex grind is incredibly difficult to sharpen when you first start out in bushcraft and you don't know anything about knife grinds and knife sharpening. So for the novice, it can be a bit daunting, because convex grind can be very difficult to sharpen if you don't know what you're doing. And again, I'll explain how to sharpen all these knife grinds, etc., that I've got here on the table, what I've shown you today. But the convex grind is not for the beginner. So so I don't know obviously where your skill set is, but if you're a total beginner and you want to buy your first knife, you've never used knives, never sharpened a knife or anything like that, then I would avoid all the knives I've just shown you. After the Scandi video, I would avoid all them knives and go with the Scandi grind as your first knife. Okay, so I would have probably avoid obviously convex grinds. That's a bit difficult for the beginner to sharpen. Hollow grind, flat grind and saber grind, so all them four. There's nothing to stop you from buying them, but for the pure novice, for the pure beginner, I don't like to call novice because it sounds a bit rude, but for the beginner and you don't know what you're doing yet, I would go with my choice. My first choice would be go with a Scandinavian grind for your first fixed blade, before you start looking at other options when you gain a bit more experience, because you don't want to go buy a knife, a really expensive knife, and then ruin your knife because you don't know how to sharpen it or you don't know the correct angle of it. And it's a bit daunting task. So Scandi grind is for the beginner is the way to go until you gain more experience. You can't go wrong. Again, with a Scandi grind, you could do light chopping tasks. If it's maybe this kind of size, definitely process wood with it. Again, because of that Scandi grind, so it aids itself because of that wedge shape. So it's really good for splitting wood because of that wedge shape. Pretty good at carving as well. But if you are buying a Scandi grind, try and get a Scandi grind with a higher bevel instead of a shallow one, because if it's got a higher bevel, then it's a lot easier to process wood. It's a lot easier to do really good carving with it. It's a much better slicer. There's a lot of Scandi grinds that is a bit too shallow and it's too thick behind the edge, and although it might be good for batoning and things, it's definitely not the first choice for carving. So I'd choose a Scandi grind with as high a bevel as you can find for your budget and for the price. So yeah, probably going to leave it off there because it's now 43 minutes. So that's the difference in different knife grinds and why I think you should start with the video before this with the Scandinavian grinds. Obviously ease of sharpening, especially in the field, and it's a good all-rounder. It can handle the heavy stuff as well as being a good all-rounder for carving and things, and it's a good starting point for you. Hope you enjoyed the parts and not being bored too much. I've tried to go as basic as I can to try and help you, the basic bushcrafter, on where to go with knives and what to choose, and why I've made this video for you, because obviously with a big world the way it is now and retail places, and it can be a bit daunting on where to buy a bushcraft knife, what kind of bushcraft knife, what kind of steels. None of that matters at this stage. So just go with the cheapest, with a Scandinavian grind, learn how to maintain it, sharpen it, which I'll do obviously other videos with it after this one, and you can't go wrong. Okay, so don't get overpowered by different grinds and different expensive knives. All that will come on later on when you're more experienced, and then when you gain a lot of experience in the field and you know how to sharpen a knife correctly, different knife grinds correctly, and use a knife like it's an extension of your arm, that's when it's time to move up and maybe get a custom knife made to your specifications and your grind. So yeah, I hope that helps, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye for now.